So, hello everybody, can you hear me? Good. So, I will talk about, this is me. I have been in Postgres forever, doing all kinds of stuff. Was at Skype, wrote PL Pro. No, actually, other people wrote, I designed it, language for sharding. I wrote some patches for making vacuum enterprise ready, have written some books. And then now I have been at Google for quite a long time already. And I will talk about first why I think everybody should move large portion of their programming to the database side, why it's good, also why it's maybe not. And then I move to talking about Postgres support for embedded languages, which for some reason are called PL languages. And then do some dive into how to use PLv8 in interesting ways. So first, why database, why server-side? Database is not really a thing for, or not mainly a thing for storing data. It's managing access, correctness, guaranteeing all kinds of interesting properties about databases. And it is so, the standard ACID properties, atomicity, consistency, isolation, durability. And how do you work with databases? It's basically you send commands, small programs to database, you get back results, and then you do whatever you need. And I've seen many people who are doing front-end programming complaining that SQL is complicated and it would be much easier to use JavaScript or C or whatever. But it's actually not, the complexity is not the language complexity, it's that data management itself is a complex thing. And SQL just kind of mirrors this complexity and exposes it and makes you think about it. And SQL is really a very advanced thing. It was designed to be not programming, not declarative, not a programming language where you specify exactly what to do, but you tell the system what you want, and then it figures out itself how to do it in a secure way. And you can, if you write SQL, you can say that you are SQL prompt engineer. Basically, you are figuring out how to explain to database what you want, and then you get back the results in the best possible way. And SQL is different from the modern LLMs in that once you get it right, you are guaranteed to get the correct answer. There is no playing around with your temperatures or things and trying to get what you want. So why to use database functions? I have quite often met the attitude that you shouldn't put your business logic in a database, you should keep it somewhere separate. And it has multiple problems. One is that in modern relational databases, lots of the things, in addition to just defining the structure, is business rules. There are foreign key constraints, there are check constraints, there are all kinds of other things that you can enforce in the database. And if you don't do it in a database, then it's much harder to do it anywhere else, especially if you have multiple client applications, multiple systems. So doing declarative things is almost always easier and less work and guaranteed to be correct. So if you try to do it on applications, then almost always there will be gaps, something is not covered, new application comes in, makes mistakes. So, and if you do database functions, then you just package together a certain operation or unit of work. And you can think of a database function as a microservice. You have this microservice, that microservice, and you just call them. So also if you need to figure out how to test them, think microservices. How do you test microservices the same way you test database functions? In this sense, they are very much the same thing. So also they are almost always better performance if you package things up. I'll go through a small demo using BGBench. So the standard BGBench built-in test does this. Basically it gets some random numbers, then it does one update, one select, 2 more updates, then insert into history table, and that's it. And then it commits. So, but you can package it up in a single function, so that instead of doing 7 calls to database, you will do only 1. And here what's the function looks, it's more or less copy-paste, and then changing the parameters from the BGBench format to just parameter format. You actually can write your own BGBench scripts. It's a very versatile tool to do anything, like even data generation or other things. You write scripts like this, and then you execute them, and then you have something that does. And for calling the function, you must have a different script that does all the setup the same way, but then it does just select from the function, passing all the arguments. And here is a test. So exactly the same thing with scale 100. You get 2.5 times better performance. And this is on a local machine. There is no long delays between client and the server. It is all just the context switches and then local data passing. But still, you get, and because it is better performance, it is also less contention. So if you have more contention, which I here did by having more parallelism, but smaller scale factor, which means that the BGBench updates are blocked for some time on one of the tables that has only 10 rows, the branches table. So here the difference became much larger because in case of function, because it's faster, it also locks the rows function, and the aggregate is that now it's 6 times faster. So there are definitely upsides of having functions and of not having the overhead from client-server traffic. But it's not just PL, PGSQL, or SQL or others. Postgres is built from ground up to be really extensible. Everything is designed to be changeable, and everything is designed in system tables. And I think even like things like operators, you can define your own operator. If you want to do addition different way, then you can. For example, say you want to have additional saturation that you can't add more than, say, 10,000, then you just define your own operator. I would advise also then to define a different type for that operator, otherwise you mess up other things. But you can actually change things if you are a super user. And functions in any language can be directly called from SQL. They can call each other. But even if they are in different languages, then they all go through Postgres types. So there will be conversion to Postgres data types on way in and out. And Postgres has quite a large set of different function types. The simple is just scalar functions, scalar, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. They return also, you can have a function that returns a tuple, which is also kind of scalar because tuples are also types. Every time you define a table, Postgres behind the scenes also defines a table type, so you can use that also as a type, even as a column type in some other table. So it is, again, built up from the foundation to be extensible, and new types are easy to add. Then you can have functions that behave like tables. You can return a table. The old syntax for that is set of record. They do the same thing. You can also have the opposite. You have a function that operates on a set of rows or set of single values and returns one value, aggregate functions or window functions. In Postgres, when you define a trigger, you must first define a trigger function, this kind of implementation details. In some other databases, you describe the trigger function in the trigger definition. And there are lots of internal functions that also sometimes can change. For example, if it's not documented, then, for example, don't use the hash function in any place where you store it. I used to work at Skype and I used hashes for sharding, and at some point Postgres optimized for a better hash, and suddenly our sharding was broken. So always check that it's a documented function if you depend on it. But because Postgres, everything is visible, you can discover them, you see them in the tables, they are there. And there are several types of functions. There are C and internal functions. They are both written in a compiled language, usually C. Nowadays also Rust is becoming very popular, but there is also support in Go and Zeek and other modern languages for writing Postgres functions. Then there are the PL interpreted language functions. PL BGSQL is the one that is included, but there are also many others, PL Perl, PL DCL, also PL V8. And then there are SQL functions. Basically, a SQL function is just one SQL after the other. It's different from PL BGSQL, where you can have also loops and conditionals. SQL function is just multiple SQL statements. But a few versions back, Postgres added ANSI standard SQL, which is defined as not like all other PL functions and old SQL functions where we just put everything in a string and then pass a string. If you start instead of the language SQL as a string, you do begin atomic, then it is compiled differently. It's stored as a plan tree. It's integrated into the plan and optimized, which doesn't happen to normal functions. So it's, again, a different way to use functions, and it has different options. It also is checked more. It's other way for standard functions. Usually just check that the syntax is right. This also looks up all the reference tables and things, so already at compile time it finds out if something is missing. And also it means that it has dependencies, so if any, it's very, very much like a view, but with parameters and different syntax, and so it can be, it has dependencies, so you can't drop a table if a function depends on it. If PL/BGSQL function depends on a table, then what happens is that if you drop the table, then at some point it just stops working. And there is also a concept of trusted and untrusted languages. And the things that are compiled have full access to server and can do anything, which also means that it's quite easy to break things if you're not careful. This is not true about the PL untrusted languages, but these have access to the system that you may not always want to give to all your users. So you can open files, you can send signals, you can open sockets, all kinds of things that you may not want all users to do, and also you may want, not in a managed environment, you usually don't allow these things. And SQL is always trusted. It has all the same rules as normal SQL. And then there are many trusted languages, PL Perl, PL DCL, and PL V8. That's the one that we are spending the rest of today, my talk. So V8 is Google's JavaScript engine that is used inside Chrome. It's high performance, it does just-in-time compilation, there is security teams working on it continuously. And it can run JavaScript and also WebAssembly. And there is wider security work on Chrome, but also the same security work keeps it secure inside Postgres. One problem there is that Google doesn't give up kind of good version releases. Building it is a bit of a tricky thing. And this means that it's actually not included in most Postgres distributions for Linux. Maybe we can do something about it later. And it looks like this. You create a function where the code inside is just JavaScript. On way in, arguments are converted to JavaScript functions. On way out, the result is converted back. And if you use any of the cloud providers Postgres, then you already have it. You just do create extension BLV8, and you can start defining functions. But it's also not hard to get it on Ubuntu or Red Hat. You just go to the GitHub page, check that the build requirements are there, and then make install, and you should also be able to do create extension BLV8. Okay, now I will go through two samples where you would use BLV8. One is verify JSON against JSON schema. It's more or less based on a real example that we got. Postgres has had support for JSON type for quite a long time, but there is no standard ways to check it against a specific schema, because JSON started out as a very flexible thing. You could serialize anything, but then people find out that it's not always good, and they wanted to move JSON back to something more resembling a relational database where you have checks on what can and cannot be in a JSON file. And the standard way is a JSON schema standard, and there are lots of different implementations of schema validation. One of them is PG-JSON schema by Yugabyte, to just package the Rust module doing schema validation. And there was, I think, 2 days ago, no, yesterday morning, there was a talk about using PGRX and then Rust for extensions. It's a very powerful thing. I think it was PL Rust, but PGRX, you can do anything, you can access anything, you can write also things that uses unsafe code. And the end result is native code, optimized and otherwise good. And it will expose a function, JSON bmatches schema, that takes two JSONs. One defines the schema, the other is the JSON to check. And then you can just put it in a check condition, and that's it. You can only insert or update the field to a matching to the JSON that matches the schema. Another option is using BLV8. There are lots and lots of different JSON schema validations. The one we are looking at is AGV. They claim to be the fastest one. I haven't verified that part, but it is fast. And how to use it? Easiest way to get it is actually you install it into Node and then go use Browserify. That is a Node application that takes a package, which can be a set of multiple files, and makes it into a single file. And what happens here is that it makes a JSON code that when you run it will bring a function into a namespace or multiple functions that you can then use. This is how it works on Node in browsers. And but for BLV8, you have one more step. You take this 230 kilobytes of JavaScript and you put the create or replace function AGV ahead of it, and then at the end you put the line that says basically just wraps it into create function statement. And now you have something that when you run it, it will instantiate the schema validation system inside your BLV8. And now you can use that by calling a few functions that it set up. First, you use BLV8's own functions to find the JavaScript function that it created. That also will instantiate the whole system by calling it. And then you create the validator function, and then you put all this in BLV8 start block. There are other ways you can also just check that it's there, and if not, then instantiate, then you don't need the startup trick. And the validator function itself will take a schema data and then table name and then create a validator. And what is specific and different from the Rust version is that if the validator is not there, then it will create the validator specific for that schema. So the validator function creation happens only once. And then you just use it as a check constraint and verify that it works. And that's it. And the validation performance is very good. For small schemas, it's more or less equal to PG-JSON schema. So doing 20,000 validations is 0.3 seconds on both sides, and it actually becomes faster on second than execution for BLV8. And also, BLV8 is much faster than PG-JSON schema if you have large schemas, because PG-JSON schema compiles the schema each time you call it, and at some point it starts to have quite large overheads. So this is the case where actually JavaScript is faster than compiled code, both because it can compile functions on the fly, and also because V8 keeps optimizing the generated function in the background. V8, I think, has 3 or 4 levels of optimizations. First, it just interprets if it says that function is called enough, then it does a light optimization, and then it does more and more optimizations on it, so it becomes faster and faster. And the second one I'm going to talk about is how to use WebAssembly from inside BLV8. Sample I take is SHA-3. SHA-3 is a more modern and more secure version of, it's actually not a version, it's just called SHA, it's a different algorithm, but it's considered, it's also more CPU intensive. It is available in PC Crypto, so it's easy to check that you get the same values, same answers. And for demonstration, I took a WebAssembly implementation from this link. This is written in C, compiled using MScript and into WebAssembly. They have also extensive JavaScript front end that calls it, which makes everything really complicated. But the core hash generation is actually quite simple once you get past it. I didn't compile it myself, I just pulled it again as an NPM package, but the result has a file that has JavaScript. I think the whole JavaScript is about 12 kilobytes, and it has about 4 kilobytes string in it that is actually the compiled WebAssembly. which looks something like this. For ease of use, I package it into a separate function in Postgres that decodes the base64 encoded thing and then returns it as binary value that can be then directly used for instantiating the WebAssembly function. This is the one that actually does the compiling. It's similar to BLV8 that it puts some functions and other JavaScript objects in the namespace. So, and this took quite a lot of work to figure it out how to do it in BLV8 because in browsers and Node this is loaded asynchronously. That is not available in BLV8. BLV8 and Postgres has a single-threaded execution. But in the end, it all became much simpler than it was in the original module. So you first use the code to make a module instance, basically module, and then you make a module instance from the module. You also make a memory view that is used for communicating with WebAssembly. It's all documented inside Mozilla pages, what's there. And then you export three functions and the interface to the memory in WebAssembly. And the actual function will first, it checks that it's instantiated. You already have run it once. And in this case, if it's not, it does it. So the first call will be some 20 milliseconds. The next one will be faster. It's really fast. At least for me, it's fast if it happens in 20 milliseconds. So even running it in first time, it shouldn't be slow. And then the hash calculation itself does initialize. Then it feeds the whatever you're hashing to the function, and in the end, it finalizes and then uses the memory view to pull out the 232 bytes of the hash. And for performance testing, it is a little slower than compiled. It's not as good results as we had with BLV8 JSON schema, where we got actually better performance than compiled. But for most purposes, it is good enough. And if you need to get something into Postgres, or especially in Cloud Postgres that don't allow your own modules, then this is a good way to do it. So for hashing 1 million short strings, the native does it in 1.4 seconds. WebAssembly does it in 5 seconds. So it is. So it's about almost 4 times slower, but I would still consider it quite fast. And to test if it's actually the code itself that is slow, or is there some overhead, I also run it on longer strings. So if I did the same on 1 million 1 kilobyte strings, then the difference was almost 2 times smaller. So the WebAssembly ran 2 times slower than native. And again, so a single execution there is now to hash 1 kilobyte. It takes 12 milliseconds, and native does it in 6 milliseconds. And it's still together with all the other overhead that goes into query processing, so that it is, I would say it's quite fast. I tested the WebAssembly actually up to 1 billion rows query, and it ran much longer, 1,000 times longer, but it still finished. It didn't run out of memory. Everything was fine. So what's next? As you see, currently the setup is quite complex. So for WebAssembly, it would be nice to work together with Rust people or to ourselves so that the BLV8 function itself will be generated as part of the compilation instead of having to dig inside JavaScript or figure out how it works. And maybe have some kind of specification or manifest inside the WASM module that can be used to check and verify that your WASM actually is what you think it is. And for the JSON schema, we have some interesting plans. So currently, the language handler for BL functions must be a C function, and then it will stay so. But what we are currently looking at and actually making quite good progress is that we will allow writing your language handler also in JavaScript, in BLV8. So, and in this case, all the setup I showed that you must do will happen when you compile. You do create function, your JavaScript function, and the source code is the JSON schema. And the result of this create function will be another JavaScript function that just verifies that schema. and once we have that, we can also support any other transpiled languages, of which there are hundreds. So you could write any language function that transpiles to JavaScript and have that support easily available. So I hope it opens up people more using more interesting languages, interesting ways to write server-side languages. One of idea would be just transporting not just object relational model, but the whole functions to be executed in the database. Yep. So I hope I got back most of the time. So any questions? Yes?
Thanks for the talk. So what are benefits of using V8 instead of some simpler or lightweight WASM runtimes like WASM 3 or WASMer or whatever?
The first thing is that it's already there. And I also would think that the fact that there is active and more or less guaranteed to be maintained team behind that looking at security is also a big plus. It doesn't rule out having at some point some WASMer, or I think there are also 3 or 4 at least of the WASM runtimes. But because it's there and you can already use it, it is kind of a no-brainer to use. Also, one interesting thing is that, again, I guess others will also do it, but it looks like the V8 also at some point goes and optimizes your WASM code even more, like same way as it does with JavaScript. So that could be also an additional benefit.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Thank you. It was a wonderful talk.